Why did I get the Sony FX30 camera, and should you get it? Well, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I will tell you my top reasons that I chose the Sony FX30 cinema camera. So why did I get the Sony FX30, a crop sensor camera, in basically 2024? Well, first, I think my experience with diving into cameras a few years ago might help you understand my choice. When I bought my first interchangeable lens camera, I was buying mainly for photography, and I ended up buying a Panasonic G9, a micro four thirds sensor camera and lens system. And the G9 taught me a lot really quickly. It taught me about the differences in how smaller sensor-sized camera bodies in relation to the focal length of the lens, the f-stop number, and the distance to subject all affected the ability, or lack thereof, to capture light, limit noise, and how it affected my ability to get a shallow depth of field with seemingly comparable focal lengths and f-stop numbers versus a full-frame system. And in all honesty, a shallow depth of field, or the ability to blur out the background, is really what I wanted when buying my first interchangeable lens camera system. And that's just harder to do at times with a micro four thirds sensor or an APS-C sensor camera. So although the Panasonic G9 was a great camera, it wasn't ultimately what I wanted. Turns out what I really wanted was a full-frame camera and lens system because of the low-light capabilities and because of how much easier it is to get that blurred background or shallow depth of field, which is why 2 months after I bought the Panasonic G9, I ended up buying a full-frame camera, the Sony A7 III. So buyer beware, but at least I got an education out of my Panasonic G9, and it led me later to trading it for a Panasonic GH5, which you're seeing right now, and which I still use daily. I'll switch to the FX30 on this view in a minute, but I promised myself I would never buy another crop sensor interchangeable lens camera system. It was full frame for me. Now, don't get me wrong, as I've always said, any tool in a great artist's hands can produce great results, but full frame can get you more light, less noise, and a blurrier background most of the time with less effort, because you would need all three of these micro four thirds prime lenses to give you about the same amount of background defocus and zoom range as this single f2.8 lens for a full frame camera. So why, with all this love for full-frame sensors and its abilities for clean images and shallow depth of field, did I end up buying a Sony FX30, an APS-C or crop sensor camera? Well, I'm going to tell you my top reasons why I am now the proud owner of an FX30, and maybe my reasons for getting that camera will help you in your search or desire for your next camera, but I'll leave that up to you. All right, so why did I get an FX30 over, say, its direct counterpart or competitor, the Sony FX3? Or why did I not just get maybe another Sony A7 IV? Or why did I need a third camera at all? Well, number one, honestly, cost was a huge factor over the FX30's big brother full-frame version, the FX3. But price was not the only factor. The FX30 is less than half the price of the FX3. It's either recently gone on sale or Sony just decided to cut the price to about $1,600. The FX3 is effectively $4,000. That's more than double the cost of the FX30. It was a no-brainer. The FX30 really is a great deal from a financial perspective. I would much prefer the full-frame sensor of the FX3, but I had no personal or professional justification to spend $4,000 on a camera. All right, reason number two, I wanted a more video-centric camera or a video-first camera. I almost always use a second camera as a side view for my videos, and previously this was either my Sony A7 III or my Sony A7 IV, but the A7 III couldn't record for more than 30 minutes, and if I wanted to use my A7 IV, since it's my daily carry camera, that meant when it was time to film, I'd have to go get it out of my bag, get it mounted and ready to record, and I just wanted to keep my Sony A7 IV more mobile while just having a camera always mounted over here to my side for my virtual meetings and recording videos. So the FX30 is just a video first camera. It's meant as a video camera. It can record for long periods of time, and it can live here at my desk for the most part. And I was able to sell my Sony A7 III, which paid for half the cost of a new FX30. Now, my main camera I use here in my studio for my front shot is still my Panasonic GH5, which is what you've been seeing as this front shot up until now, and my FX30 has been the side shot over to my right. And the GH5 is also definitely a video-centric camera. And despite its micro four thirds sensor, I've chosen a lens and position that gives me the view and depth of field that I'm happy with, this view that you're seeing right now with the GH5 and the Panasonic 12mm f1.4 lens. So this is my normal front view camera, and I'll probably keep it that way. But let's swap things and move my FX30 to the front and put my A7 IV maybe over there. Hang on. And here's the FX30 with my Sigma 16 to 28mm full frame lens in the same position as the GH5 previously, and the Sigma is all the way zoomed out at 16mm, but with that APS-C crop you get on the FX30, I get roughly a 24mm or about a 73-degree field of view, so it's about the same field of view as my GH5 with that 12mm Panasonic lens. And here's a comparison between the two cameras and lenses. Number 3, occasionally I use my cameras in my live event production work. I say occasionally because most of the time in my live events, I'm employing camera personnel and larger video cameras like Sony broadcast cameras or camcorders or even robotic PTZ cameras like BirdDog P400s. But there is the occasion where a smaller, more quickly deployable camera is needed that I can fit in my bag. So having a camera like the FX30 that was video first, that had a fan to cool it so it wouldn't overheat, and that I could easily fit in my bag and quickly deploy on live events and know that it would just keep recording as long as it had power and enough storage was great. Number 4 also has to do with live event recording, and that's taking advantage of the fact that you pretty much automatically get a more zoomed in field of view given the same lens measurements in millimeters. When you're at a live event, the physical spaces that you're in for the client are always larger than a small home studio like I'm filming in now. We're in hotel ballrooms, large meeting rooms, or convention centers, which means the cameras are almost always at the back of the venue, pretty far from the talent because there's an audience sitting directly in front of the stage, and you can't have the camera close to the stage, otherwise you would block the audience's view. So you have to put the camera in the back, and you have to have a longer zoom range on your lens to be able to frame up your talent so they are large enough to be seen well on the recording or the live stream. With a crop sensor camera, you're going to automatically get that tighter or more narrow field of view out of your lenses, whether you use your existing full frame lenses or APS-C specific lenses. And if I use this Tamron 50 to 400, I can get a whopping 600mm equivalent focal length. Now, photographic style lenses aren't the best option all the time for live video work, but if needed and if they fit in your bag, they can save you on a live production if you have a problem with one of your other cameras or if you need a last minute second camera angle. And yes, most Sony cameras like the A7 IV and the FX3, you can put it into crop mode and still get the tighter field of view. But I think on the FX3, when you do that, you're limited to 1080p instead of 4K. And the more narrow field of view that you usually get means you can get really nice photos or videos with either no cropping or very little cropping in post, like these shots I got of the moon with the FX30 and the Tamron 50 to 400. So the crop sensor and resultant tighter field of view could be seen as a drawback, but I'm leaning into it since I do need a tighter field of view when I use it out in the field. All right, number 5, dedicated red recording lights on multiple sides of the camera. The FX30 has several visual red lights that will immediately give you that visual confirmation that yes, the camera is indeed recording. And they're viewable again from almost anywhere around the camera. There's a long LED light on the rear of the camera, there's a circular red LED light around the recording button on the top, and there's a small red recording light on the front of the camera on the top right. And all this is in addition to the red border you get around the screen when the camera is recording. With the FX30, you can just quickly glance over, see a red recording light from almost any angle, and know, yeah, I'm recording, I'm good to go. Photo-centric cameras like the Sony A7 IV only give you the red border around the screen and a tiny occasionally blinking red light on the back of the camera. And most photocentric cameras typically do not have any red recording lights on the front of the camera, making it harder to know from a distance if the camera is still recording. All right, number 6, a very little known feature that the FX30 has that its big brother, the FX3, does not have, as of yet, is variable shutter. And no, I'm not talking about shutter angle. Shutter angle just automatically sets the shutter speed based on the frame rate that you've chosen. It basically helps you not forget to change your shutter speed. So having your shutter angle at 180 degrees will always keep the shutter at or roughly twice your chosen frame rate, keeping your motion blur similar at those different frame rates. Although none of that really matters anyway, because as of January 2024, neither the FX3 nor the FX30 has shutter angle anyway. Although I hear it is coming in a firmware update, but as of now, neither camera has it. But I'm not talking about shutter angle, I'm talking about variable shutter. Variable shutter allows you to set your shutter speed to something in between your standard shutter speeds. For example, most camera shutter speeds are in whole numbers like 1/50th of a second, 1/60th of a second, 1/80th, 1/100th, and so on. But the variable shutter option on the FX30 and actually on the Sony a7 IV as well allows you to turn it on and then finely tune or choose a shutter speed that's not one of those rounded numbers. So something like 1/52.7th of a second instead of 1/50th or 1/60th. And other cameras, like the Panasonic GH5, also offer this feature. It's just called Synchro Scan on Panasonic cameras, and larger Sony cinema and broadcast cameras call it ECS or Extended Clear Scan, and is basically the same thing as variable shutter. And here on the FX30, when I turn on the variable shutter, I can then set my shutter speed to say 1/50.7 or dial it in very small increments. So why is this feature important? Well, if you want to film with non-video lighting or consumer light bulbs like Philips Hue lighting, or lighting that's just not meant to be filmed with a camera, like filming in your garage with fluorescent bulbs from the hardware store, or if you need to film a TV screen or even a smartphone screen, you may get a visual video roll or flicker by filming under some types of lights or from, say, TV or computer screens, or even when trying to film lights on equipment like this Blackmagic A10 Mini. And right back here in that lamp right below the guitar, I have a Philips Hue light bulb. And if I take that camera and show you some B-roll that I shot earlier, if I film that light, I get this visual roll or flicker moving down the screen. And here I've got the variable shutter off, and you can see that I'm in 1/50th of a second. And here's some footage of the FX30 filming the TV screen behind me, and you can see the flicker there as well. But if I turn on variable shutter and just watch the camera screen while increasing or decreasing the shutter speed, I can pick a finely tuned shutter speed that gets rid of that flicker in almost any of these items that I need to film. And you can see here on this Philips Hue light, I landed on about 1/52.7th of a second. And the TV screen also looked good without any flicker at about 1/52.7th of a second. And whether or not you get flicker from any of these sources in your camera depends, of course, on your camera, the frame rate, the shutter speed, the sensor readout speed of the camera, the color and brightness of the light bulb. There are lots of factors, but all of these things can happen in a given scene that you may need to film. So it's always something to look out for, and having that variable shutter feature on the FX30 makes this camera much easier to film in various environments. This feature alone was a big deciding factor in my choice of the FX30 over the FX3, mainly because I have various Philips Hue light bulbs here in my office and other consumer lights, and because I like to have a picture on that TV in my background sometimes when I film. And last but not least, number 7, the FX30 and the FX3 give you those built-in 1/4-20 mounting points all over the camera, which makes it a lot easier, especially when I do take my camera out on an event, to easily mount more items quickly to the camera, like a small video monitor and a microphone and maybe a light, without having to always add clamps to the tripod or trying to mount everything to the hot shoe mounts and hope it doesn't fall off. So having built-in mounting points, definitely a bonus. So here in my home office, as you've been seeing, I either use my Sigma 16-28, which gives me, again, that pretty close field of view to my Panasonic 12mm, or a 24mm equivalent if I were using a full frame camera in that position. But since I wanted to use the FX30 mainly as my side camera, hang on, gotta move things again, and I wanted a wider shot, I picked up the Viltrox 13mm lens, which gives me roughly the same field of view as a 20mm on a full frame camera. And that lets me be able to keep the camera closer to me so I can still reach the controls, and also still gives me a pretty wide view so you can see my desk, you can see stuff on my desk in case I'm talking about a microphone or a lens, or I'm demonstrating something here on my desk. And it also still gives me a bit of a wide view so you can see my environment and a little bit of the background behind me. And at f1.4, I do get a little bit more of a blurry background even with the FX30. And I'm actually having to use the variable shutter feature in this shot. There's no video flicker from that Philips Hue light, but if we look at the screen of the FX30, you can see that I'm at 1/52.5 of a second. So hang on, let me just turn off the variable shutter feature real quick. There, it's off, and I'm back at a standard 1/50th of a second. And if you look right about here, you'll see, hopefully, this video roll. It's definitely apparent in the video file. Sometimes YouTube compression gets rid of it, but YouTube may not be your last and final destination. You may be handing this off to a client. So if you're getting this video roll, you'll either have to change out the light bulb, and you may not have a different light at your disposal, or just turn on the variable shutter feature. And then you can just dial it in until that flicker basically goes away. It may not be completely gone in this shot, but I need to finish this video, so we'll leave it there for now. I think it looks pretty good. All right, so those are my top reasons why I decided to get the Sony FX30. It's a more video-centric camera that I can use in my home studio and out on professional live event productions. It has the very important variable shutter, lots of red recording lights around the camera, additional mounting points, and it doesn't entirely break the bank. Maybe these reasons are some reasons that may help you decide if it's for you or if it's not. So let me know down in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button because you know where they are, and I'll see you there. Later.